Hello and welcome everyone to another exciting episode of ConLostCast. Today, starring Jacob McKee-Wright.
Hello.
Connor Locke Warburton.
Hello, everyone.
And myself, Bretton Hamilton. Hello, guys. Today we're kind of starting a new thing going forward, where every couple weeks or so, we're going to kind of go back and discuss what are some topics within the game industry that are very complex and very difficult for games to kind of touch on, whether that be war, sex, mental illness, religion, sexism, etc., and kind of spend an episode dedicated to one of these topics and just discuss, how is it currently being done, why is it being done that way, and are there other ways of exploring that medium in a tasteful way, or are there some topics that are just wholly off limits? And I think, it'd be a very interesting exercise, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you have anything that I didn't just mention right now that you think games could possibly depict better, or there is some controversy on their depiction, leave a comment down below, and we'd love to kind of do an episode about that. That being said, today specifically, we're talking about violence. How does the game industry depict violence, and how and can it be displayed and discussed in a different light than how it currently is? So kind of first off the bat, just a brief disclaimer. This particular episode is touching on physical violence. That is not necessarily domestic violence, sexual violence, or necessarily even war. It is very much just Grand Theft Auto style, I'm going to hit you with the car I just stole from you.
Yeah, the actual act of violence in games, I guess.
Yes, the killing of, mindlessly killing the grunts in Halo and so on and so forth.
And it's not that we don't want to handle these topics, it's that we feel things like domestic violence and sexual violence warrant their own podcast to themselves.
Absolutely.
And we're just going to use general violence in games as an opener to start the conversations.
Yes,
indeed.
Absolutely.
It's a very complex sort of issue that we do really need to research and really look at before tackling, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think on a real quick disclaimer on discussing violence today, we as game developers and as gamers, we are very much of the mindset that though violence does not cause violent activities, it can kind of lead to aggressive behavior, very much how, reading a sad book may make you sad, but it's not going to make you depressed. We will link down in the doobly-doo a really incredible video by that's run by a guy, the channel is called Healthcare Triage, and he will go into the specifics of do violent video games cause violence and acts of aggression and so on and so forth. And so definitely give that a listen. We're going to kind of just skim over that for now, because the topic today is how is violence portrayed? Yes, so first, right off the bat, why are video games violent to begin with? What are your guys' thoughts?
I think my main thought on it, and I'm sure you will elaborate, is that violence is something that we can't ethically or morally interact with or do within society. We seek things that have a fantasy aspect to them, or some kind of outlet that we can't experience within the everyday world, whether it be experience different country, different lands, complete different physical fantasy reality. And violence is one of those things that we can explore with very little consequence to gain factor. We can gain everything that violence, we can experiment with all the gains that violence would cause without any of the negative consequences and dealing with those actions.
However, I do feel like if there is a negative consequence to come of it, I would say a big part of that would likely be the desensitization. Like, I am so desensitized to violence. Like, when I see something online that is of I was watching the news about a year ago, and I'm watching the news, and this guy is being chased in a car thing, and on live news, the guy takes out a gun and blows his brains out after running into a field, and that I was taken aback by how unaffected I was by it.
Yes, but you're also still specifically talking about screen violence.
Yes.
And there's a very large difference between screen violence, even if it is in reality, to real-world violence. When if you actually were in person and you could see and smell and hear the action of someone blowing their brains out, I doubt the desensitization would occur there. even though games have given us an interactive experience, it's still not a complete
it's very
sensory
much
immersion.
simulated sort of stuff. That there'll be certain constructs that you just can't create in a video game setting.
Yes, and you see the way people react on the Oculus Rift to violence when you have that space in between you and the screen, to when that space is 3D stereoscopic view. When you're in virtual reality, all of a sudden, violence can actually make you nauseous and such. We saw Quentin Tarantino create a distance between you and the screen within violence by experimenting with blood being portrayed as grey scale. All bloody scenes within Kill Bill, I believe one, were all in grayscale because he believed the color red generated visceral reaction within us. And I think there is that distance again being caused.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think there are so many games that, like not violent games, like those simulation games like Flight Sims or Guitar Hero or Dance Dance Revolution and so on and so forth, and or those games that are almost abstract concepts like, say, Tetris or Bejeweled, etc. I think those are examples of non-violent games that I think, when I play Bejeweled, it's not like when I play Bejeweled as much as I do. It isn't necessarily to stack colored gems in a safe environment that doesn't like affect me. Where violence, yes, there's no downside to me exploring violence in a video game as opposed to in real life, where Bejeweled and exploring some non-violence things in video games, there's not quite that escape, but
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I don't know if we're talking about... we're definitely talking about crossover audiences, but I feel like it's specific styles of gamers or specific factions of gamers, and which you can be part of multiple factions, I will say, that play these different games. Bejeweled is a different kind of faction of gaming than Skyrim is.
Yeah, a very different genre of who their market is, who they're appealing to.
And that's fine, and as I said, you can be a crossover to that. But at the same time, if you really need a Grand Theft Auto fix, you don't pick up Bejeweled and go, oh yeah, this is doing it for me. Yes! I got a 5! Look at that line.
Look at the explosions!
I don't know, Candy Crush Saga's got some satisfying explosions.
Oh, that's a good point. I think was it Peggle as well. They get over.
Yeah,
they are incredible. Anyway,
but so I don't know. Let's move on to kind of what are some examples of how violence can be poorly depicted in games? What are some examples of where it's just way over the top? Or because I think if you're going to depict violence in video games, I don't think censorship should be done in any sense. There will always be a place for Call of Duty just mowing people down. But at the same time, I think there are games that attempt to recreate realistic violence. And I think there is a very fine line between the portrayal of violence, just reproducing violence on screen so the player can be like, oh yeah, that's violent. But also at the same time, I think the other side of that line is where you are depicting that violence as real, but you are also putting a spin on it.
Adding a meaning to the actions of, say, shooting someone would mean so much more than just shoot someone, you get points.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's that's a levity that I would enjoy if there was consequence to my actions. I really enjoyed in the Oblivion series how much you were punished if you did kill someone in a town. If you weren't entering that town, unless, you paid off, your fine with the Thieves Guild. I like that. I like that a lot. And I wish more games had a hefty consequence.
But so here's something neat. In one of the more recent kind of indie games, there's a game out called Shovel Knight. Have you heard of it?
No.
So Shovel Knight is a side-scrolling platformer that's built in kind of that retro pixel style game. We'll have a link down in the doobly-doo for it. But basically, there are all these dream sequences where this entire story is you're trying to save a girl in a tower. But every time when your character has these dreams, this girl is falling out of the sky, and you are fighting off monsters until she comes on screen and is falling to the ground. And you you have the potential to jump up and catch her in midair so she doesn't hit the ground. But now, mechanically, the best thing to do for your character to get the most coins or to get the most currency is to ignore her completely and just kill as many bad guys because they drop coins during that time. But I think there is an interesting depiction of violence in that where, yes, the entire game is just a silly, mindless, you're just hacking stuff up. But also, there is an emotional, like, oh, well, even though, like, she's not worth any points, I have that desire. And I feel like that reflects on violence as a necessity. And so that game, without meaning to, reflects violence as a multifaceted thing where it's not just a truly bad thing. It is also a necessary evil.
There's also that idea of allowing violence to happen as well. Whether you're a bystander and you can prevent the action, or you're completely passive and you can't do anything.
Or you're an active sort of aggressor in that action.
Multiple kinds of violence can be in an interactive format, such as a video game, can be done. Like, so I still remember in Far Cry 3 where there is a scene in a town where there is a prostitute who's being slapped up by her pimp, and you can't do anything because you can't.
You're forced to be an observer, and there's nothing mechanically for you to step in and stop it. You have literally just you could just only stand there.
You can ram your camera into them, but it's not going to change a thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's to the point where your guns are taken away in that town. You just holster them. You have them, but you just holster them. You can't pull them out.
Yeah.
I mean, are there other scenarios? Do you guys have any examples of other passive or ones where you can interact or?
Okay, so in the can/passive interaction side of things, a long while back, I believe it was. Well, I'm not even going to attempt to guess which Modern Warfare it was, but one of the Call of Duty games, there was a scene where you walk through an airport, and this was like maybe 5 years after 9/11, so it was relatively fresh, at least in America's eyes. But there was a scene where you walked through a populated airport with a bunch of other terrorists as you just mowed down civilians.
The Russian, that was what it was
called. Yes. And that was a really phenomenal scene, I thought, just because it
Yeah, you're an active
they were not
aggressor in that
afraid
sort of thing.
to show that. But on top of that, like when I played that scene, everything in the game was telling me, oh yeah, shoot these people. That's what the level needs you to do for you to pass. And so when I played that part, I shot above their heads. And, so I was not actively participating, but the fact that I had the option to be observant and my choice of not actively killing these people kind of put the violence and framed it in such a way that it's like,
hey, at least I didn't participate in this.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm just have to be along with the crowd. So.
But at the same time, by me not being able to turn down and shoot the other terrorists, I was compliant, but I wasn't actively kind of killing people.
You were being a bystander, that you were just letting it happen even though you had the power to stop it.
Yes. And I think there was something about that at the time I was, and like, I'm not going to go off and sympathize with terrorists or what have you, but there are people who genuinely get brought into and they have no, like, have you seen the movie Four Lions? I believe it's Four Lions.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's a comedy about 4 terrorists, and they all have their unique reasons for being a terrorist, but, they're all trying to, aspire to give for the greater good, and they all have very warped ideas for why they're doing it. But it was the same kind of thing where, I felt like, when I was thinking about the thoughts of what would be going through the head of this character, it's like, I've been dragged into this. I'm not going to kill my friends, but I'm not going to be actively participating in this. And there was a certain sense of guilt that, like, I shouldn't even be here. The disclaimer at the very beginning saying that this was like a very violent scene. I should have. I'm glad I didn't skip, but
you're feeling like.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point. No one ever does anything for the wrong reasons. Sometimes we get dragged into something and then realize it's the wrong reasons and make massive regrets. But for the most part, if you're going into something with conviction, even if it's opposed to someone else's conviction, that doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it opposed to another opinion. And that's fine as long as you're not taking away someone else's freedoms and liberties. Unfortunately, sometimes you do.
Yeah.
And that's probably where you're going into some pretty ethically bad zones.
Yeah. I don't know, Connor, can you think of anything that, like, a game that you might have played that was particularly, it asked you to commit an act of violence that you thought, like, oh, wow, I really don't want to do that?
Well, I think very much Spec Ops The Line did that in huge degrees. That, I don't know, there was a couple of scenes even that you had to make a moral choice that you were given two alternative sort of decisions, but each of which were not especially that morally right. So the whole idea that there was no right answer of doing something, and both of those actions were in essence violent.
Yes.
So, going an example, I think there's a point where you go into a crowd of which is very much hostile at you, and you have to clear them out some way. So, do you either shoot at the crowd? What do you do? And you're only given a certain amount of time to do this. Yeah. And so, that was incredibly powerful in that. You could actually see the real world consequences that, you have to clear these, mechanically you have to clear them out. Morally, you really do have to think about your decision, but because you're only given a certain amount of time to do so, it really kind of forces your hand into doing something where you don't really have all of the information. So what you were saying before, Jake, that, you don't necessarily do bad things because, well...
You believe
they're
bad.
You do it because they're good, but often it's just because you don't have the right amount of information available to you at the time.
That's very true. And you also highlight something else where sometimes there isn't a good choice. Often in life, and that's quite a powerful thing if you can depict that properly in games, sometimes you have only bad choices surrounding you. I mean, and you have to decide, it might not even be which is the lesser evil. Yeah. Everything might be equal evil.
Yeah.
But
well, okay, and here's a thought. The games that Connor and I mentioned, I feel like they are good examples of violence. Yours is a bad depiction of violence.
Yes.
Because in your thing, violence is literally used solely to say, hey, now you have to hate this character, these towns more, you need to... It was used almost as a gimmick to get you to be value. It's a shock value.
It's pretty much just pointing out to the entire audience, hey, this man's bad. Isn't he bad? Look at all the bad things he's doing. Look how bad he is. It's bad, 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 bad.
Utilizing NPCs as a tool for visceral reaction.
It's one-dimensional. It's not really any further thought to it. It's
and
just,
mind you,
he's bad because he does these things.
As a designer, that is something that you should have in your tool belt. That should be something that designers can and should do at times, which is... use violence in such a way to evoke an emotion. However, I feel like there are times, like in the one that you mentioned, Jake, with Far Cry and the prostitute being slapped around and stuff, where it wasn't even for a main plot or further...
No, it was completely aside. It was a random encounter, and there's lots of random encounters like that where women are being raped. Yes. And when civilians are being shot and murdered, and they're all by pirates. All pirates are doing all this, pretty much.
Yes. Who are the main... I think the evil people of that game, I guess.
Say again?
What did you say?
You are?
Or the
pirates.
Yeah, pirates.
Oh, yes, the pirates are the evil people. And arguably you're both... There's arguably both sides are ethically wrong. Yeah. There is no good team on that. There is just two very bad sides fighting and a whole bunch of people getting caught up in the middle. Yeah. Very unfortunate.
Now, see, I think that is an interesting point, but I feel like that was not necessarily as emphasized.
It was...
Was it?
I feel like it was... I feel like the emphasis on the game was a lot of hack and slash, but I do feel like it was a very obvious point where you're depicted as the native tribe, almost. You're depicted as the people of the island, but and the pirates are the people that took this island from you, but you're also very obviously a very ethically wrong and savage people that own this island as well. So it's kind of like, better of two evils? Nope, you're both really bad. Okay, who's gonna not kill me? Yeah. Who's gonna not kill me? Yeah. Please.
Well, and I think okay, I guess I'm having an easier time coming up with good examples of how violence is portrayed in in a thoughtful or a thought-provoking way, not just I guess it's super easy to come up with the multiplayer in Battlefield where it's just a slaughterhouse or just a grinder of people just going in and dying, and that just totally it doesn't accurately represent or it doesn't even like contribute anything to that conversation.
Okay, violence and doom.
Mm-hmm.
That's just violence.
It's pure and simple. Actually, no. There was a couple of like really, really bad tasteful games that has been. I think was it Postal 2 as well. I think if you've ever played it.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was just there wasn't really any thought to it. It was almost a parody of itself. That it was so ultra violent and without any meaning whatsoever that it created meaning in itself. That people thought, hey, no, this is actually really, really bad. I shouldn't really be doing this or playing this game at all.
Well, see, and that kind of reminds me of like Hotline Miami. I know for a while there, like it's a top-down pixel game, right? But it's a shoot 'em up. But at the end of the day, the game's themes focus around ultra violence. But at the same time, I feel like they do kind of comment on it by after you wipe out everybody in this like complex, you then have to walk back over the dead bodies of the people.
So it goes that whole murder house sort of thing where, you do kill everybody, but it adds that added consequence of you going through it and literally just, I don't know, just thinking, oh, wait, no, I've actually become a slight monster in that regard.
Which is nice that you had that levity post-play. There's something nice about that because it's almost like if you know a speed camera is going up, coming up. Like, does anyone else feel this? Like, when they warn you of a speed camera, the speed camera is kind of pointless because you just know people will slow down when they know the speed camera is. It's almost the same way. If you know at the end of it you're going to be made to face everything you've killed, then maybe you'll think about prior.
Yeah.
It's almost better to go in there
with that visceral first reaction.
Yes. How would I react when I don't know I'm going to be made to confront things?
Yes. Well, and I think there's definitely something telling because games are an experience and they are a very personal experience. Seeing how you react, like my experience in the airport doing that Russian kind of mission in Call of Duty, that was very telling of myself as an individual. Like, I am so glad that I didn't. My first reaction wasn't to just go with it.
Yeah, it's a personal experience. I think I personally didn't shoot at all, and I don't know. I reckon it was a little bit more sort of emphasized by me not shooting and just seeing all this ultra violence. So I was sort of like a ghost or bystander just seeing all of this violence happen, and I was just, I don't know, almost shell shocked that it's just, whoa, this is essentially against the entire grain of that game. Where, FPS shooter, you shoot all the things. This, I don't feel like shooting in this FPS.
Yeah, I mean, I found in Assassin's Creed Black Flag that there's a position where you have to, there's many positions to this, where you have to get away with your ship, basically. And they make the odds impossible, but I took the challenge and I was trying to take down the ships because I thought, I'm just going to capture all these man-at-arms while I'm here. And I thought, because of my greed in that, this isn't exactly violence, but there was violence and greed. I'm just going to, I'll briefly aside this. Yes, I thought because of that, that's why, spoiler, anyone who wants to listen to this because it's a massive storyline within Black Flag, only access for a few seconds, this is why Blackbeard dies, I thought. I fucked up because I was greedy and continuously tried to take over these ships. That was my greed as a gamer, trying to hoard ships that caused Blackbeard to die.
Yeah.
Turns out, no, that's just the progression in the storyline. That's where he dies.
Yeah.
But it made me seriously go, should I be playing games differently?
My hubris.
No.
My greed.
This is not okay.
Yeah.
And the rest of the game I played very not greedy.
Yeah.
And it was really funny. I was kind of like, I always thought, what will that NPC that I really like happen to? What will happen to them?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
How can I preserve them?
Well, so okay, here's a question for you guys. Are there ways, or are there games or styles of violence that, like, or depictions of violence in games that should be off limits, that you think is a step too far? Like, I guess what comes to mind is, like, the Sandy Hook shooting last year in the game, in the Columbine game, and some of those other things.
That said, I think games were made out of those things, and they were quite thought-provoking, and, well...
But mind you, at the time...
But yeah, at the time, I think it was very much a hot topic. Button topic. I guess it was too soon to do it, because people who had actually experienced that, like all of the guilt and all of the emotions involved with it, they were still existing, and it was very much still fresh in their memory. So it was sort of almost, I don't know, almost mean to those people.
Yeah. Well, I know even myself at the time, like when Sandy Hook was like a fresh thing, I was in college. And it's when people were making games about it, my first initial gut reaction was, you're really trying to recreate that horrible thing. But now that thinking back on it, and at the time I was whatever in a headspace, but thinking back on it, it's like, well, no, let me actually do the research to see what the game is showing. Because I think in the Sandy Hook one, I can't speak for the Columbine one, but in the Sandy Hook one,
it's pretty much, it's very basic sort of, it's almost visceral. It's very, all you do is literally, you pick up gun, shoot things, and at the end it just tells you how many people you killed versus the historical value, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
So, I know it's pretty much as almost in that journalistic way. It's just, here it is, in game form. That's just what it is.
I think the issue that we found with that as well is it gave you almost... It wasn't a score at the end. It wasn't ranking how well you did, but it did tell you how many people died. We discussed prior to this that maybe it would have been more powerful if just nothing had happened at the end. That
you weren't
game
given
is
a
over.
score.
You're finished.
Yeah.
I just thought of something, and it was a small joke flash game that someone made online, but it was Flappy Bird, specifically with the Twin Towers, and you're an airplane. I think that is extremely tasteless. I think that is a very bad way of handling that scenario.
Yeah, no, I think that's incredibly distasteful, and I think that that doesn't contribute anything to the conversation. It merely just shows those events unfolding.
Well, no, it doesn't even show. It makes fun of.
Yeah.
It makes light of the situation. And yes, it happened a fair time after it, because the distance between Flappy Bird and 9/11 was a distance. Still horribly distasteful. I don't think there's ever a point in which that becomes comedy.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe is an aspect where violence, especially real violence, becomes comedy. That's...
Absolutely.
Although there is a sort of black comedy in using those events just as in a more comedic way. But that said, in using that scenario, you're pretty much almost disrespecting that original event.
Yes, and the victims of.
Yeah.
Yes. So, okay, why don't we go and wrap this up a little earlier today? Well, we could talk on violence at length, and there's a lot of topics that we'd like to get around to. As we will be kind of returning to this violence in its many iterations, we'll kind of delve into the various aspects of it another time. However, as kind of what we talked about today, violence in the day-to-day, in the smashing Goombas, in the cutting down hordes of, monsters, what are some ways that it can be tastefully done? If not tastefully, different. How can we do it differently?
I think tastefully can be when maybe if you identify a violent issue and you let people explore it and you let them reflect on it. And I think reflection is a big thing. If you have to set up a scenario which reflection can occur. If you set up a scenario where all you've created is numbers of bodies, then people are turning bodies, potentially people, into a score.
Yes.
So there's a line there.
Well, and I think my thoughts on it is I think that key word is reflection, giving the player the opportunity to take a step back and go, whoa, look what I just did. And I got caught up in that visceral moment kind of bloodlust thing, where, hey, I got double shoot speed, I'm going to use it, that kind of thing. Well, I think, I lost my train of thought. Connor, I'll come back.
Well, I pretty much agree with you there, that I think in doing that you pretty much have to add meaning in some way to that violence if you want to make it actually have an effect on people. That whether that you literally forced upon them by saying, this is bad, horrible, they're the bad guys, or actually giving them a moment to reflect on, hey, wait, no, I've actually killed a whole room of people, and has actual huge consequences in terms of real-day life and in-game sort of thing.
And I think the point of reflection should not be look, you should feel bad because of this. It should be directly tied into the mechanics. You are mechanically facing the consequences.
Yeah, if you're made to feel bad just by them pointing out that, you should feel bad, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no. That doesn't add anything.
No,
that's just
hey, wait, no, that's a big jip. No.
Yeah. And it's a very lazy way of approaching that. So I think this has been it was a very interesting talk, and I think, it gave, at least myself, a moment to kind of reflect on things, and I hope you guys got the same experience. We'd like to hear your thoughts as well, if there are any particular games that you think depicted violence in a particularly positive or a particularly negative or a tasteful or a distasteful way, we'd love to know about them down in the comments. And if there's any...
Yeah, it'll give us a whole heap of research to do for the later topics. So yeah,
Yes.
if you think we touched upon, I think, a little bit of war in games, or you'd like to see more of it, do tell us. We'll actually give it some actual...
Expanded thought.
Yes,
Yeah, indeed.
Absolutely. And if there's anything that wasn't mentioned today that you would like us to cover or like us to spend more time on, exactly that, leave it down in the comments. Thank you very much again for giving us a listen. Like, comment, and subscribe. ConLostCast out.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you kindly.
Bye.
Waiting for the bus in the rain, waiting for the bus in the rain. Waiting for the bus in the rain, waiting for the bus in the rain. There's my bus. No, wait, that's a train. What's going on? That's not my bus.